Ted Leonard of Spock's Beard. Welcome to 69 Face of Rock. How are you doing today?
Doing well. How are you?
I'm good. I'm good. So it's been what, 7 years since you released Noise Floor, your last album. What was going on with the band during this time?
Well, the recording of Noise Floor was a kind of a tumultuous event. It wasn't so great for band morale. Let's put it that way. Trying to figure out a nice way to put it, but it was hard, man. We got to the end of that, and we did a short tour for it. And at that point, it was just everyone was so burnt on um, the recording process and everything that it was just decided that we were just going to play live and do festivals and and just carry on that way. But we were done recording basically. It was until the 2024 tour that we did, which started out as a UK run from a promoter that just really wanted us to come over, coinciding with a festival that we did in Holland. Um, and that was the morale at that point. We'd all been doing other things in the meantime, but the morale at that point was just completely rejuvenated, and we all came away from that going, what are we doing? The sum of this band is so much better than its parts. When you get these five guys on stage, it's such a good show. We're way too good to not carry on. So it was after that tour really that we decided we were going to start, tinkering around with a new album. And then Rio showed up with an album's worth of material all ready to go. That he had already been starting to work on for his second solo album, but then sort of steered the writing back towards Spock's style and had it all completed, and we all listened to it and decided, this is a great collection of songs. It's very cohesive. It sounds like an album, so let's just run with this. If we want to do something more collaborative later, then we can do that later. But for now, we've got this is a great album already. The stems were all pretty, well fleshed out, and so yeah, we all just got the stems and started putting our stamp on it. There was a couple songs where Al rewrote some lyrics, and because some of the songs, the lyrical style wasn't really in our liking. Um, and so like I rewrote all of the Archeoptimist was called the Destructionist before. It was a completely different song, had a little bit of a political tint to it, which I didn't really care to involve myself with. And so I changed up the lyrics to that one entirely. And like I said, yeah, I'll contribute lyrics. So it became collaborative in that sense, kind of after the stuff had been pretty well formed.
Mhm. So the title Archeoptimist, it sounds rather complicated. Care to explain the title and how it relates to the music?
Sure. So the title is actually kind of a pet name that a father has for his daughter, and this is a father-daughter relationship that is existing after kind of an extinction event, like a cataclysm of sorts, where very few humans survived, and only those in the probably in high elevations and very landlocked areas survived. And so the daughter was born post the cataclysm. So she was born in a completely different, type of type of world than you and I live in here. But all of the adults in the tribe, of course, were from that civilization, that previous civilization. And so the Archaeoptimist becomes the pet name that the dad gives the daughter because she's always digging around, trying to find, scraps of or evidence of the previous civilization. And she finds a key one day and is so proud of it. Um, but her general outlook is of optimism is so like juxtaposed against this tribe who's seen civilization come to an end, and so she becomes this inspiration, and eventually a leader. At the end of the song she actually takes over as leader of the tribe. So it's a big long epic story, and the Archeoptimist is just the pet name that the dad has for
Mhm.
her.
Um, Now, Spock's Beard is not a band that stays for too long in one area musically. Where do you think the Archeoptimist is taking the band?
Where do I think it's taken? So I'm not sure that it's well, first of all, um, there's a lot about it that harkens back to the Spock sounds of old, especially with songs like aforementioned. I mean, Forethoughts, excuse me. And then there's little bits where was obviously harkening back to a specific song in the Spock's catalog. But, with Rio's writing, there's a lot more of a kind of an adventurousness, I would say. There's a lot more, especially chordally and melodically. He's very influenced by fusion and jazz and things like that. So that hasn't really leaked its way into Spock's writing much in the past. But even the chords where I had to write melodies for the Archaeoptimist, it was, it was really challenging to make melodic sense out of these kind of weird fusion chords that Rio was working with. So I think in that way, I'm not sure if that's going to be an ongoing directional change, but certainly I could see us, relying that much more or giving that much more time to Rio's writing. I think he really kind of proved on this album that he can come up with a lot of material and a lot of good material. He does have the help of a co-writer. But obviously, between Al and I, we're both, strong lyricists and melody makers as well. So I think in the future, there's going to be a lot of collaboration between Rio and Al and I. So yeah, hoping to start something a little bit more consistent than we've been in the last 14 years anyway.
Mhm. So while always making progress, the band is very clear when it comes to its influences, like particles of Yes, Pink Floyd, classic Genesis, even Gentle Giant are still present in new music. How important are those influences to the overall picture?
Well, obviously they're still important because they're still very, very evident, especially the Gentle Giant, aspect. I think my since I've come along, I bring a little bit more of the Western prog, the Rush and the Kansas with me, especially from from a melodic sense and and just how I sing. There's the Kansas influence that is pretty obvious sometimes. And but yeah, all of those influences are still so important. I mean, we also, if you talk to Al, he would probably nod more towards David Bowie and some of these other, the Kinks and and influences that are outside of the kind of the prog world.
Mhm.
But I think all those influences from outside are equally as important because otherwise you just start to sound like a Yes knockoff or a Genesis knockoff. And I don't think any of us would have ever been interested in being that. Even with when Neil was the sole writer, there was the Gentle Giant moments and there was Yes moments musically, but melodically, it's always, I would say Spock's and Beard has always been a little bit more straightforward melodically. Like it's a little easier to ingest, some of the Spock's Beard melodies. It's very melodic. It's very memorable.
How would you say the direction of the band changed since you joined, or how much musical input do you have?
Well, there was on that first album, there was quite a bit of musical input, obviously because they took a couple of my songs that were fully formed. And on the second album, it was kind of the same. It was like it's weird, I think there was a little bit of a step towards AOR kind of rock, when I joined. Submerged itself is not it's not really a prog song. Hiding Out was not a prog song until Spock's got their hands on it, and then we just changed it. It was a song that was straight six for most of it. We just made it in seven, made bars of five, and kind of progged it up a bit, and then obviously put a lot more emphasis on the keyboards where it had not been. It was mostly a guitar song when I wrote it. But then I started writing kind of for Spocks, like so for Minion and um, Hell's Not Enough from Oblivion Particle. Those were songs that I wrote with Spocks in mind, especially Hell's Not Enough. Minion, I had bits and pieces of that song already written, but Hell's Not Enough was written for Spocks. So I don't know if I influenced the band or if they influenced me. I think
Both
it's a
ways,
little,
doesn't it?
yeah, it was probably a little bit of both.
Yeah. Um, there's also like a new level of melody in the new songs on the new album. Where do you think that came from?
Well, I think melodically, I think it was I think Michael Whiteman did a great job with a lot of the melodies that he came up with. Archeoptimist would be the only one where I took a ton of liberty once I wrote the lyrics to make the melodies work with my lyrics. So, but the rest of the album melodically was a collaboration of Rio's and Michael's, and I think um, I'm not sure. I haven't heard Michael's other material, but I'm sure that having been around Rio's writing as long as I have, that he had to kind of tweak his melodic sensibility to go along with the weird chords and passages that Rio was creating.
Mhm.
So I think it was like a more almost kind of a it's hard to know what is the cause or the effect of what of how these melodies turned out. If it was a response to the chords, to the weird passages. But yeah, there's a little bit of a quirkiness. There's still a lot of memorable hooks and everything throughout the album. There's definitely more quirkiness to the melodies because of Rio's style.
Yeah. Also, and you mentioned this before, I'm sensing aspects of fusion, which to
Yeah.
me is something new within your music. Tell me a little bit more about that.
So that, I mean, that is straight up Rio's influence. I mean, that is, I love, the if anything to do like any kind of like jazz rock, that I love the jazz influence that you hear in things like Steely Dan and stuff like that, where you hear these dense chords that are not typical rock, passages. But Rio is especially down that, and you can tell when he takes a solo because he plays outside a lot. When he gets to really just improvise, he's doing a lot of outside things. So he's always had that jazz influence. So that is mostly Rio, I would say.
Sounds good. The album has 6 tracks. Let's talk about these songs. So tell me about the single, I believe, right? Invisible, which opens the record.
Yeah, so that song was a completely different subject matter when we got the song. So lyrically, I went to Alan and said, "Hey, we got to rewrite this because I don't, it was about it was about a monster that kills people with its flatulence." And I just and I'm not kidding. Um, so I went to Alan, I'm like, "Yeah, I really don't want to sing about, a farting monster." I mean, our fans are not 12 years old, so like I was just not interested in singing about that. So I asked, I brought it to Al and he's like, "Oh, well, let me take a crack at it," because I was going to take a crack at it. And so he's like, "Yeah, let me try." And within a couple days, he came back with Invisible, which is kind of a song, I mean the subject matter is fairly obvious, almost feeling like your opinion matters less and less, or like you're not affecting people in the way, yeah, maybe you felt like you once did, and you're just becoming, invisible. Um, so I think that's what it's about. I'm not sure what inspired him to write that. Um, I don't know, but that would be I guess that would be a question for him. But that's what I take away from it. But the melodies and everything were pretty much in place, and even the phrasing. So he kind of fit new lyrics into how the phrasing was already written,
Mhm.
and even the harmony in the beginning. I recorded all the parts and then sent it to everybody else to do their parts and layer it in there. And that dense kind of jazz, chord that happens at the end of that harmony where you have the melody separated by a whole step, a lot of dense harmonies like that, kind of Manhattan Transfer-ish almost, but jazz influence, you almost expect the jazz hands, when we hit that chord. But but yeah, that was all part of the writing. So, and probably response to the chord that Rio's hitting. So you have no choice but to make this dense jazz chord out of it. Um, so yeah, that's kind of the impetus of that one.
Electric Monk.
Electric Monk was another one where the subject matter was great and was in place already. I just asked Al to like kind of alter some of the lines to make them a little bit more singable. And so he jumped in there, and that song lyrically is a collaboration between Al and Michael. Michael had written a lot of it. And as far as what it's about, it's kind of a quirky little love story, a kind of a lost love. Um, and then it has a just kind of like a comedic ending, you know. It's this story about trying to pursue your lost love, and then you finally get to her, and you're like, all this time I've been striving to get to you, and if that's not good enough for you, I'm out of here. That's
That's
basically I love how you know, and I'm singing it with such seriousness, and that's really all that I've got, you know. That's all, you know. And if that's not good enough for you, you know, it's like I guess I'll start this search anew, and then so I love you know the kind of quirkiness and how funny it ends. But otherwise, yeah, it's kind of a love
yeah.
story.
Afterthoughts.
Forethoughts is yeah, it's obviously a take on the song Thoughts, which there's been many versions of Thoughts now, including the ones that Neil Morris has done, you know. So there's been like a Thoughts Part 3, a Thoughts Part 4. We had Afterthoughts on the first album that I was on, and this one is the next iteration. And it's also just like those other songs, it's kind of random. It's almost crazy, you know. It's just externalizing what would normally be someone would be internalizing in their head. And so but then, you know, it obviously has that big gentle giant moment. And so yeah, we're just definitely going after something there. And it also has a lot of that Rio kind of quirkiness with the chord progression uh, throughout the song. It's got that fusion element quite a bit. So.
Yeah. Saint Jerome in the Wilderness.
So oddly enough, Saint Jerome apparently, and I didn't know this until an interviewer pointed out to me. He goes like, "Is there an archaeology kind of thing going on?" Because apparently he's the patron saint of archaeology. I
Okay.
had no idea of that. When I wrote the Archeoptimist, I was not aware that Saint Jerome was, and Saint Jerome was already written. So that just turned out to be a happy little coincidence. But that song it appears to be about, you know, about it's kind of like a Moby Dick type thing. Like the thing you're pursuing with such fervor your whole life is somehow ungratifying at the end. And you know, you've been pursuing it and it doesn't really fulfill you, which is even though it ends with kind of an optimism with the chorus, with the reunited, rejoined, reassembled, restored. Um, for the at least in the bridge, it's really kind of the exact exasperation of like getting through this thing to make it a creation of your own, and then not really it's not really being fulfilling. Yeah, I guess I'm just kind of repeating myself, but that's basically what I take away from it. But Michael Whiteman wrote that one, so
Yeah. And now comes the big epic title track, the Archeoptimist, which we spoke about when it comes to lyrics. So maybe talk about the instrumental side of that song.
well, yeah. So that was obviously another Rio and Michael Whiteman collaboration from a musical standpoint. I think it's mostly Rio, and I think Michael. My general sense is that Michael was helping make sense of a bunch of different Rio parts, and they formed it into this big, long, cohesive piece. And yeah, I mean, it's such a roller coaster. When I wrote the lyrics, I wrote it one section at a time. I had already listened to the entire piece a number of times, but when I wrote the lyrics, I just kept writing one section at a time because every section was so different. It became this like almost uh, bipolar song because it's like one song is really, one part's really, subdued and kind of mournful sounding, and then the next part's up, and it's like the next part's funky, and then the next, and I just kind of kept writing the rest of the story based on the vibe of that part. And so the kind of roller coaster that the music is why the lyrics are that much of a kind of a roller coaster and a full story. And then it circles back at the end the way good long pieces do, and refers back to some of the earlier, the themes and stuff towards the end. And that's where the story kind of gets wrapped up with her taking over as the leader of the tribe.
Yeah. Um, and the album closes with Next Step.
Yeah, I think that one's pretty self-explanatory. It's obviously, it's kind of funny if you really read the lyrics. If you look at it from 10,000 foot view, it sounds like, we're charging ahead, we're optimistic. Um, but the lyric is almost sounds like you're closing a door and moving on to something else. Like you're finally realizing this pursuit is not worth pursuing anymore and moving on to something else. That is not a foreshadowing of any kind. That's just how the song was written. But I kind of take it as, first of all, a brilliant musical piece, and it has some opportunities for some some of my favorite vocals on the album. And yeah, it's just I take the optimistic part of the next steps away from the song, is like, we're forging ahead, we're gonna keep moving, even if the world doesn't want us to.
And logically, what is your next step once the album is released?
So we're going to be doing a short tour in Scandinavia and Germany. Um, so that, which is weird because we've never really, we've played here and there in Sweden, but never in Denmark to my knowledge. So that's going to be interesting. And then we do kind of the usual cities like Aschaffenburg and in Germany, and I don't remember all of the names, but there's just it's just a 9 stop tour. After that, I would imagine we're going to probably take a breather and then maybe see if there's any way we can put together a tour of other areas of Europe, or get onto the next cruise, which would be nice. But I think 2026 is pretty much booked up. But yeah, and then go back, and yeah, I think Rio's already, writing more. And so I think this next time around, I'm going to say, hey, if you have a finished musical piece, give it to me first, so I can take a crack at it first. Um, and I think we've both kind of felt rejuvenated with like lyric and melody writing. It, for me, it's become a pretty atrophied muscle because I've just been so busy with my job and everything else. Um, but after writing the Archeoptimist, I was like, you know what? I love this. I love the creation process, and I want to, get that going more consistently again. And yeah, I mean, prior to that, the last thing that I had written was a collaboration with Rio for the last song on Noise Floor, which was the Beginnings, song, which turned out great, I thought. So looking forward to, getting together, trying to keep as much of this writing in the band next time and see how it turns out.
Do you anticipate any American live dates?
We are doing one, just the warm-up show at Alva's in February, which is in kind of near LA. But as far as like touring the rest of the states, it would have to be with another band. It's really hard to make it cost out. It's tough, man. It's just because the states is so spread out, and if you hire a bus, it's it's a long drive between venues. It's a so we've never toured the states since I've been in the band, and I know that they tried to do it a number of times prior, and just kind of lost money on it. So and none of us are at a stage in our life where we're willing to part with, to lose money on the proposition.
Yeah.
I'm perfectly happy to take 3 weeks and break even. It's fine, because I'm a consultant in my other job, so I'll still get paid, one way or another. But I'm not willing to lose money on it. I don't think any of us are really interested in that. So we'll see.
It has to make sense.
Yeah.
Um, Now, Archeoptimist also marks 30 years for Spock's Beard as a recording artist.
Wow.
Can you, yeah,
Wasn't it was
this album was
95?
in 95.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's crazy.
So, in your opinion, as a member and even observer, how would you say the band evolved in those 3 decades?
Obviously, it kind of evolved in some the way that a lot of life evolves in harsh transitions from cataclysmic events. It's like you have these to say that evolution is ever a smooth thing is like, means you don't know geology. But so it's been this, it was in the first six albums, I would say it was production was getting better and better with each album and kind of peaked at six. And then the cataclysmic, Neil leaving. I think the production and the style of the band was after that. Well, the writing changed very much because all the writing was coming from within the band, and everybody's style and everybody's influences are different. And at that point, it became kind of this hodgepodge of like, this is an Al song, this is a Nick song, this is, um, and back then Dave Maros wrote a lot as well, and then John started getting involved, and Stan was already involved, and so it became kind of um, it became a little bit less focused, I think, from song to song after Neil left. There's very much this song is very different than this one, but the core sound was still intact. And then when I joined the band, that's the band's sound didn't really change much. Jimmy had already been drumming for the band for 10 years at that point, but just as the live drummer, but through osmosis had kind of adopted that style from having to play Nick's parts for so long, but also brought a style of his own, a voice of his own. And, we had my songs, which were a couple of them were a little more straight ahead, um, rock wise. So I don't think that was like any kind of metamorphosis with the band or any kind of ongoing change. But like I said, it was like my songs sound like me a little bit. Um, and then, and Oblivion Particle, John started to do a lot of the writing. And so some people jokingly refer to Oblivion Particle as the first Pattern Singing Animals album because it's kind of has that vibe to it. But then Noise Floor was more of a collaboration. There was a lot more varied writing, so it was kind of more a step back towards everybody getting involved in the writing, and which I really loved. Now I don't know if it was as well received as the two prior albums. I think this album is a very purposeful and intentional nod back to the first five albums, and but with a fusion little hitch to it, like we talked about. So there's moments where Rio's going, "Hey, remember this? Well, this is how I would have done it." Like he's going like, "Hey, remember thoughts, or if you remember the doorway." There's one I can't remember what song. I think it is Saint Jerome that opens with a piano bit that sounds kind of like the doorway, and then he goes off into this fusion direction from it. And so yeah, there's like a nod back, and then like putting his own stamp on his impression of like of how that writing was back then.
That
I
sounds
guess
good.
it's
There's always a
yeah.
twist.
Yeah. Well, yeah. I mean, there's got to be. So yeah, I'm looking forward to, ongoing writing and doing another one. Especially if we can keep the personnel, stable. Because Nick is such an addition to this Nick Potter's on drums is such a great addition, vocally and drumming wise. So it's just, yeah, I'm looking forward to getting out there and playing with them.
Sounds good. Ted, thank you so much for your time and good luck with the new album.
Well, thank you. You take care and have a good evening.